Hello and welcome to the Baby Giants Investing Podcast. Join us as we chat about the weird and wild world of small cap investing, all while searching for the precious few fast-growing businesses that have a shot at becoming industry giants. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is strictly not intended as financial advice. Any opinions are general in nature and do not take into account your personal circumstances, needs, or objectives. Securities mentioned are for illustration purposes only, and this podcast should not influence investment decisions. You should read the relevant PDS and consider speaking to a financial advisor before making investment decisions. Past performance is no indicator of future returns. Podcast guests and their clients may hold positions in the securities discussed in this podcast. All right, we're live. Got a full house today. Let's start off with some good news. Then we'll get into a bit of, there's been some more takeovers, some companies doing things badly. Let me see. I've got some good news for you. This is from Hannah Ritchie, who's kind of writes a blog called Sustainability and Numbers and runs World in Data, which is some potential good news. And I'm waiting for you guys to find negatives in this. But the world has probably passed peak pollution. So this is air pollution. And basically there's a range of different reasons that we have air pollution. So she's talking about local air pollutants, nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide, which causes acid rain, carbon monoxide, black carbon, organic carbon. All these things, it looks like, based on the trends in the data, we've passed a peak in that, and they've all been coming down over the last couple of years. This isn't carbon emissions, which are still going up and causing global warming, but all kind of air pollution is now on a downward trend.
Cool. And we're getting replaced by microplastics in everything we eat.
Right. Well done.
That was too easy.
Well done.
What's the leading theory as to why that is? Is it just increased regulation in developed markets? Or?
Yeah, it seems to be. Some are still, they're not falling everywhere, but it's like US and Europe have got much tougher kind of regulations. One big one, sulfur dioxide, which we talked about before. I saw that when I worked in shipping, where they just changed the type of fuel that all the container ships used, so that it has less sulfur. You can basically run a process to remove that sulfur from it. And then ironically though, that might be contributing to global warming because sulfur makes clouds brighter. And so you can kind of track quite clearly, I've seen some images of this like global map of where we're not emitting sulfur anymore. And so the clouds aren't as bright, so the earth might be warming more. So now actually that leads me to another bit of interesting good news, because I've been talking about geoengineering solutions to global warming. And there's one in the AFR today, two different groups or people. The AFR has this pod called Tech Zero, and two different groups who are using cloud setting to make clouds brighter, basically. The first is Dr. Harrison and Dr. Eisman working at opposite ends. Dr. Harrison has a leading a team from Southern Cross University, and they're using vaporized seawater in the clouds over the Great Barrier Reef to create more shade to stop the bleaching of coral. So very localized use of clouds to shade the earth. And another group, Mr. Eisman's brand, is much more, I don't know what you'd call it, the Silicon Valley big idea, which is balloons with sulfur dioxide high into the atmosphere, into the stratosphere, I should say, which then make the clouds more bright to like reduce radiation onto the earth. But two things that are actually happening from stuff that was once just a big idea, which I think is pretty interesting.
Definitely instinctively feel more comfortable with the seawater option.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's it's a lot more localized as well, I guess. So yeah, it's a funny thing because we were doing it for decades without any planning. Now we're doing a much smaller version, much more targeted. So I think on the face of it, it should be a lot less than what we were doing before. But yeah, I can understand that. Yeah. You guys got any good news?
I don't know if this is good news, and I haven't had a play with it yet, but OpenAI released its latest model, the GPT-4o, which is the model that speaks, but very naturally. Some of the stuff that's coming out of that, it's like literally as we're recording. Yeah, it looks really cool. I don't know if you saw some of the figure robots. They had that very natural speech pattern application embedded in it. It's sort of like it was conversing and saying the kinds of things that we've sort of become accustomed to with AI, but little pauses in the speech, little intonations that just make it very natural. It's not like a Stephen Hawking is talking to you. It's like a person speaking to you. That didn't come out right. You know what I'm saying though? It wasn't like this synthesized robotic, it is a synthesized voice. You know where I'm going with this. It sounds very cool. And yeah, it just seems as though it's very hard to keep up to date with everything that's sort of happening on that front.
Interesting. So is this a free version or is this only for paid subscribers?
I believe it's paid.
Yeah, okay.
I saw some research from AlphaWise and Morgan Stanley that asked people if they had what activities they'd completed on ChatGPT, and they asked in September 2023 and also April 2024. Every kind of activity except for none of the above was lower. Now, I don't know if that's just because there are more competition. There's more competition for ChatGPT now or whatever, but it definitely doesn't really fit the, I guess, like the internet style adoption curve, like that it would be like, dropping down, I guess, over 6 months, which, it doesn't necessarily need to mimic the internet. But yeah, it definitely looks like they asked about Gemini as well, and that was down, albeit less so. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I think ChatGPT is definitely waning. Like, it was a first mover, and so it had a particular boost at the outset. But yeah, question whether the strong, like whether these GPT models are, I don't know. Like, I feel like it's possible that, we've had the initial big excitement now, and that we're going to have a bit of a valley where there's a lot of investment, but the use cases are yet to actually come forward, or at least the very widespread use cases.
The trough of disillusionment.
Yeah.
Is anyone else getting those ads on Twitter that's just like the same thing over and over again? Like, you have to learn how to use AI, like download our, cheat sheet on how to use AI or whatever. Like, it's just ceaseless. And I just think anything that's getting advertised on Twitter is the lowest of the low.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of that stuff.
I'm basically not using Twitter now, aside from our Baby Giants account occasionally. And even then, when I log in, I'm like, oh, let me log in and check or reply to a tweet or something. And then it's like horrific videos and replies that are not at all related. It's everyone just engagement farming, whatever. And
something in bio.
I'm not a fan.
Yeah,
those as well. Oh man. It's a weird thing that, and it always pushes you to the algo feed. If I could just have it go to my following feed, it'd be fine. But anyway,
it's not even fine now. It's it's gotten so much worse. Like, the spamminess is insane.
Yeah,
stop using it.
Just bots, just bot accounts and everything.
You're an exception. I mean, it's funny, right? I agree with everything you're saying, but it's a reminder to me of the power of network effects and the inertia.
I mean, I haven't deleted my account, so there's still a network effect there. If I wanted to share something, and I could see myself using it, it's just needing to be strategic with it, I think. Yeah, and it's also like most people want to eat cheeseburgers, right? Most people don't want to eat vegetables, so it's just turning up the cheeseburger dial.
If Facebook can't dent them with all of their resources and established network from Insta, it's just remarkable. I mean, that's not to say that therefore they will be around forever and go from strength to strength, but it's just the challenge of disruption in these fields once there is an established network is so difficult to break.
Yeah. One bit of news which was delivered via a tweet I got from one of the newsletters I subscribe to, but from John Arnold. I'm interested in your guys' thoughts on this because this is a bit of news that's come out over the last week. He says, just to confirm, and these are a series of dot points, climate change is unprecedented risk. Mass adoption of EVs is vital. Adoption has slowed because of lack of low-priced options. US companies are unable/unwilling to make low-priced EVs. China is a global leader in low-priced EVs. And the last bullet point, US to hit China with 100% EV tariffs.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, curious. What do you guys think about that? So America potentially will be unveiled this week, up to 100% tariff on EVs, and this is Biden, obviously not Trump, although Trump's called for the same thing. What do you guys think? Because that kind of slows the ability to deal with climate change, but maybe is it necessary for more of a geopolitical risk of depending on China for your industrial manufacturing base, etc.?
Well, that ship has sailed. We're already highly dependent on China. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, it feels as though shutting the gate after the horse has sort of bolted and doing it in a self-punitive kind of fashion. So I think it's insane. I think it's insane that the home of free market capitalism is being so controlled top down, with these protectionist measures. No one wins, generally speaking. So it's another own goal, I would say. It's political decisions are trumping rational economic decisions to my mind.
Trumping. I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Biden for now. What do you reckon, Claude? What do you think about the 100% EV tariffs for Chinese EVs?
I wouldn't choose EVs as the area to put up tariffs. I definitely think that there's some smart areas where America should make sure that it's not reliant on Chinese manufacturing. Yeah, I probably wouldn't choose EVs as the area to want to own or whatever, given that historically automobile manufacturing has hardly been the most advantageous. You definitely want to have some automobile manufacturing, but they have that, right? They've even got Tesla. They've got all of the existing Detroit industry that's sort of somehow surviving all these years later. You definitely do need to have high precision manufacturing, and there's heaps of manufacturing that I'd absolutely really encourage, the Western world to try and keep in-house or keep in their own countries. But yeah, EVs is probably not it. It's like typically automobile manufacturers have been sort of bad businesses that are like capital intensive and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I'd probably be happy to just like and also they're spread out throughout the world. You've got like Germany, you've got Japan, you've got China, you've got America, like all fairly big players in the space. So it's not exactly where I would say you really need to protect it for strategic interests, but I suspect it's more about creating like high paid union jobs, or I don't know if they're union jobs, but high paid jobs in America is probably part of what they're going for, or manufacturing jobs.
Yeah, it is kind of the area they've added a lot of subsidies to, I guess. I guess one argument for it is the defense that, the manufacturers of EVs will be the same manufacturers making whatever, weapons of war. Kind of the US turned all of its car manufacturers into building tanks during World War II. I guess that's some of the argument. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't know what the answer is. I kind of get the argument that America's way more open to China than China is to America, and like maybe you should have some trade-offs for that. But then the flip side is the deal that America was running for a long time worked everywhere except until it ran into China, which is basically being very free and open even to countries that are not free and open themselves, and they become free over time. And China's kind of the one that broke the deal, I guess, or not that they had to take part, but they're like, no, how about we just do the trade part and never, democratize.
Yeah, but it's also like crazy stuff like, China blocks Google and Facebook and or restricts all of that kind of stuff. Like, yet America lets China like own and build TikTok, and now they're trying to ban TikTok or limit TikTok or force the divesting of TikTok. And then so China's using TikTok to like retaliate against Biden. Like I was reading an article the other day that's like 2/3 of the content on TikTok on a platform that's like skews young, which should skew to the left, right? Because younger people generally skew progressive. And it's like 2/3 of it is like pro-Trump, anti-Biden stuff content on TikTok. Yeah, so it's like it's pure like retaliation for that. It's a bit of it shows the ineptitude of the Biden administration that they didn't slam TikTok like straight away, like before it got more powerful lately. Doing this into an election is crazy stuff. Like it's obviously hugely powerful. Twitter showed how powerful it was when, right when things were looking dicey, when Trump was trying to cling on to the power. A big thing that helped like end it was Twitter taking away his like megaphone. And that was just a small act, let alone, we see with Facebook, with Cambridge Analytica, how they're using data to like target voters and basically trick people, essentially. Like the ability, politicians have always tried to trick people, tell them one thing, tell them what they want to hear. The oldest thing in the book is that every single election, I guess, parties that all around the world, you have this dynamic where political parties that ultimately primarily look after the interest of the wealthy repeatedly manage to get, people who are not wealthy to vote for them. And the way they do it, it's always a different thing. And it could be, something like, the typical kind of thing is, you're scared about people coming in, whether it's a border wall or, boats coming with refugees or whatever it may be. Like you get
they took our jobs.
Yeah, exactly. Or even that, it's just like to get, it's like race baiting or whatever it might be. Who knows what they're going to use this time, but there's always a thing that like the party that's representing mostly capital, there's always something that they're trying to get the people that actually labor and who, like, by which I mean, that they work for a salary and that they would benefit from like higher wages rather than, lower taxes on capital gains. They always find some way of getting those people to vote for them, whether it's like family values or whatever like jingoistic thing it is. So yeah, it's TikTok and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. All of this added data and this way of disseminating information now has arguably made it even easier for people to do that, because they can really present, to somebody who might work in a car factory and really benefit from Biden's policies and Biden's protectionism. And, he might have family that rely on whatever their very inadequate healthcare insurance subsidy thing is, like Obamacare, they call it. They might all be already positives to this guy's family, but then Facebook or whatever will be serving them ads about, Mexican border and trans women, transitioned men competing against girls in sport, and all of these things that like are emotive and might piss somebody off. And then you get somebody who just to vote against their own economic interest because they're like super angry about people with different skin color or unusual gender identity.
I'd go a level deeper. Say it's all you've got. Life is getting harder for a lot of people. And then when that happens, you look for a reason and an explanation.
Scapegoat. Yeah.
You look for scapegoat, and these answers are usually the most forthcoming and usually the easiest. I think America shot itself in the foot in a massive way when it weaponized the dollar and did some very significant sanctions. I do, because all of a sudden it just made China their biggest trading partner go, what? And one of the biggest buyers of their debt go, wait a second, this could really go against us. And it was like it's a second or even third order effect from that, which, by the way, I'm not saying that Russia shouldn't have been punished and the rest of it, but as soon as you politicize money, you potentially, you basically disincentivize the trade through that currency. And the US is going to lose a massive edge by not having that reserve status, at least in that hemisphere of the world, which we're already talking about sort of, their own, like whether it's the yuan or something like that. And so you've seen China massively sell down their reserves, massively pull back on trade. And this is making the world worse. There's going to be inflationary consequences to this as well. There's one potential in terms of the rise of robotics, which sort of helps that. But there was a reason that China was making everything. And we got a huge benefit out of that in terms of really cheap goods. China got a massive benefit as well. Trade is mutually beneficial. It just did so much for the world. And then a lot of chest puffiness and beating, and just it got really sort of silly. And now we're all going to be worse off and live in a more dangerous world as a consequence for these actions. So I think it's pretty depressing, frankly.
Cool. All right. I don't think de-dollarization I don't think it's as big as everyone on Twitter talks about. If you look at the stats, there isn't actually that much. But we can chat about that another time.
To cheer you up a little bit, Andrew, the US foreign exchange reserves of China has, there was a period when it came down a lot, but I think that it's kind of been stable for the last year or so.
Yeah, I don't think it's as big as people worry about. I do think it's something that could be big, but maybe we come back to that in another episode, and we've got a few more stats. All right, what other news in the headlines? One that caught my eye was Bapcor and the use of consultants there. So Bapcor's one we'd followed. I'd owned it many years ago in a service called Pro, and it's just kind of an interesting one, an article in the AFR about McKinsey's program to improve Bapcor and how that might have led to a lot of its trouble. So unveiled in 2022 by the company's then chief executive, Noel Meehan, it is this program called Better Than Before, which used 15 McKinsey consultants working feverishly for several months. In all, there were 300 separate projects designed to lift sagging profits. Since then, Bapcor has downgraded profits 3 times in 8 months. More than $600 million has been wiped from the company's market cap, which now stands at $1.5 billion. Mr. Meehan is gone. Paul Drumble, who was going to commence as CEO, surprised shareholders by announcing he had changed his mind one day before he was meant to start. And yeah, basically it just seems like it's all a disastrous flop. And maybe just reinforcing beliefs for me, but it seems to me when a company that has been having at least a quasi-founderish position goes to needing consultants and having 15 consultants come in to change the business, always precedes disaster. Sometimes it precedes a kind of financially engineered good period where things look like they're better than they are, but never does it lead to, that I've seen, I shouldn't say never, there's probably some cases, but an overwhelming majority of examples seem to lead to just the core part of the business falling apart.
Yes.
And it's just kind of stunning how often this keeps repeating itself. But I think it's kind of, for me, an orange flag, you might say, or even red flag when there's a lot of consultants involved. I think of A2 Milk as well, when Jane Herdlicker brought in a heap of consultants and all the disastrous kind of things that resulted from that. But yeah, just keen to get your guys' thoughts. What do you think it is, if you agree with the role of consultants as an orange flag?
It's such a red flag, man, to me. The only problem is that they don't tell you that they're often companies won't really tell you that they're doing it in any announcement. They're not oh yeah, we've hired some guy from McKinsey XYZ. Problem with management consultants is far out. As an investor, they're the opposite of what you're looking for. They are going to come in there. They're going to, first of all, they're going to take their remuneration in the form of a fee, a very high paid fee. So they just want to whatever, do work, get the money. And they've got a completely short-term point of view. They don't even doesn't matter if their thing works to them. They get paid whether or not their thing works. All they want to do is make some good ideas that the management thinks good, that they think will fly. They want to put out some presentations, they've developed a new plan or whatever, but they've got zero, nothing riding on whether that plan works at all, nothing at all. So I wish I could know when, this kind of stuff was happening. Now, the exception to that is that if the company itself, the board has made already made a capital allocation decision, about what they want to invest in or whatever it is, or even divest something, for example. Like, yeah, I can imagine consultants can help in that scenario. Like, hey, we want to do this. Like, we might potentially need some people to like come on board to help us like do this transition or something like that. Or alternatively, different kinds of consultants, but like might help you sell a business. But the point is that if it's like coming in for a strategic review, like a high level, like what should we do kind of thing, that's a massive red flag to me, because that's exactly what the board and management should be doing themselves.
That was my point, right? Like, what the hell are we paying you? Why don't you, if you're going to tap out and say, I'm out of ideas, like, see you later. You don't get to have your salary and outsource your responsibility and your job to someone else with a terrible reputation. It boggles the mind. It's just like, Matt, we're going to make you the CEO of company X, Y, and Z. Brilliant. What's your first point of call? I'm going to hire some other people to tell me what to do. Like, no, that doesn't work.
Half the time, the CEO himself is ex-McKinsey and then like brings in McKinsey. Do you know what I mean? Like, you see it all the time. It's like there'll be the CEO, like, this is why they try and they do CEO, and then McKinsey wants people to leave after a couple of years, and they're like, now you go and try and get into a corporate career, because they want to get their ex McKinsey consultants. I'm sorry to pick on McKinsey, but whatever. Like, there's a few that are just the same, but like,
they're incredibly smart people, right? And it's an incredibly lucrative role. But how is this person in any way qualified? They've never been on the front line. They've never worked in that environment before, and they're telling you how to do the job. It's kind of like, I think we've just lost touch with reality. And this person might have an IQ of 180 and topped all their classes and done every MBA sort of course under the sun. They've never run a business. They've certainly never worked in that industry before. But after 15 weeks, they're going to tell you how to do something that's, it just makes my head explode. We spoke to Daryl Abotomy. He's now at Adrad. We should talk about that one day. I quite like that company. I think we mentioned it briefly once. But he slipped in a bit of a comment during that discussion, which was just like, yeah, they've done some dumb things there. And it's like, and he went...
Yeah, I mean, he was on the AFR. He was on like the front page the other day, just before they dropped that trading update, like just
really?
Roasting them. Yeah.
Well deserved. Yeah.
Did we ever find out what his disagreement with them was? Because he left with the disagreement with the board.
I don't think he got into that specific, but yeah, you can have a read in the AFR article. It's just very bad, basically, just completely divorced, blah, blah, blah. He didn't get into the specifics of whatever the dispute was, but yeah, I imagine many things probably.
I was reminded, this is a little bit of a segue, but I think it makes the point well. So a bit of a chat on Strawman with RFG Group. I mean, what a disaster that thing was, right? And the point that I think what's interesting with RFG Group is that there was a point in time where any financial metric you wanted to look at was the one you wanted to see. Strong and consistent earnings per share growth, high return on equity, strong and growing margins. Like just go down your checklist of things that you would want to like filter for or scan for if you were going to go about things that way. It's like everything was right. And yet everything imploded gradually and then suddenly, right? And then everything imploded. And why is that? Because you had essentially things where everything was being engineered around making the numbers look really good. And then what was suffering there was the front line, where it's just like you go to Michelle's Patisserie to get the most brilliant cheesecake in the world in 1996. And now it's this is rubbery, disgusting 8-week-old piece of rubbish. And like it's very easy to sort of hide that to a point, and then it comes undone. Laser skin clinics in the news. That franchise is collapsing as well, because again, it was some, clever clods came in here and thought, hey, we can do this and we can save a little bit more money and we can do this and we can do that. And it's just like, yeah, but at the end of the day, if the business is delivering a worse and worse service, I mean, that's where Daryl, I thought, always stood out to me at Bapcor, was that he was absolutely laser focused on the front end experience. Like, what problem are we solving? Who are we solving it for? If they have a good experience and we make their life easier, they're going to come back. Now, I don't know how you put that into a spreadsheet per se, but that's the focus, right? And that's this qualitative stuff that I think we as investors need to remind ourselves of, is that the numbers come as a consequence of these sort of softer features, these more difficult to quantify features, but it's kind of everything. And as I've matured as an investor, I've just gone further and further and further towards the qualitative kind of stuff, because the numbers are all backwards looking. They tell a story, they're important, but they're backwards looking, and they won't tell you the full story. Okay, sorry, rant over.
I definitely think in larger companies, it's harder to get any kind of advantage through numbers, just because they already get pulled over massively.
Yeah, I think it's kind of that Goodhart's law, right? When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Like, these things should be measures, not targets. So, like which they kind of become everywhere, but by targeting stuff like that, you can over optimize for one variable, like margin, for instance, and then you completely undermine the experience. And it's like, yeah, it's like the buildup of risk, because it's undermining the whole system. But it takes ages until that system reaches collapse, and then it all happens at once, which is kind of what happened with RFG, where actually everything all the suckiness kind of came out at once, right? So they had issues with accounting, but they also had issues with just the quality of the product. There was and all these things had all been undermined for a long time. Yeah, so I completely agree. I think it's something. And I was stunned. I was just going to say before, I was stunned when I was at uni, because I always thought of consultants as being like wise old hands, something you do after you finish in your career. But then all the best people at uni wanted to be consultants, but they had zero real world experience. I'm like, how can you consult people when you've never done it? But that's kind of the model, right? They throw probably 10 people at it who've never done it before, and there's one old hand maybe to add a bit of weight when they need it. And,
now think about it this way, Claude, I know you've had some plumbing issues with your house recently, right? Now, who do you want? Do you want the 50-year-old tradie who's fixed 1,000 pipes, or do you want someone who's got maybe, I don't know, 3 times the IQ level and has studied plumbing, to the nth degree and written a thesis paper and, and then them to come in and do it? I mean, I'll go the former any day of the week.
Literally just anyone who will come up and fix my problem.
Very good. Yeah. Do you want to? Is there a segue there to Perpetual?
Yeah, I'll give you a segue. Speaking of absolute cluster.
Andrew's fired up today.
The state of the world has just got me so depressed. Perpetual is my favorite whipping boy on the ASX. Used to be AMP, because that is another disaster. And Perpetual is coming up as a close second there. These are both institutions that have been around for a long, long time and had incredible incumbency benefits. And basically we're just there to, it's very hard to go wrong in an industry with so much wind in your sails, like mandated super and you just all the part of the distribution networks, and to screw that up is unforgivable to my mind. And another example as to why quote unquote blue chips are so often anything but and not deserving of that name. It's just, and this has been a car crash in slow motion where you have just seen year after year after year of mediocrity and decline. And it's just, and again, the people at the top were on salaries that would make you weep. I've been to some events before where it's I don't want to name, but board members and senior executives at some of these things are there telling you, how to run business. Why am I listening to you for? What are you bringing to the table here? I mean, if anything, you're an example of what not to do. Yeah, I don't know. You guys go. The only thing you can do as an investor is just vote with your wallet, right? And get the hell out. And they are never turning around. I can't believe there is some value in the brand, I would imagine, because Johnny on the street just doesn't know. And it's I need to put my money somewhere. Oh, I recognize that name. It's a 100-year-old company. I guess that, you can't go too wrong with that. Oh, man.
What do you think led them astray? What do you think?
I think there was the hubris of board and management into not recognizing what their core competencies and strengths were, and just trying to grow and grow and grow and not doing it in any kind of effective way. I mean, it comes back to the RFG example. What value did they deliver for their end clients? Pick me a Perpetual fund that outperformed the index over any stretch of time. I'm sure you'll find one or two because there's so many of them. But as a percentage, virtually none. And it's kind of that's really all you need to know on a long-term basis, is that your raison d'etre is to provide good investments for your clients. You haven't even done that, right? So it's everything is downstream of that. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think it's just interesting to read about and think about Perpetual, because it could help inform how one invests in similar businesses. Because, for example, I think I've mentioned it before, I own shares in a company called Fiducian Group. It's very similar to a funds manager. I mean, essentially part of its business is a funds management company. It also has a business part that's the financial planning, and it also has, the technology platform. So it's not a pure funds management business, but it's still just interesting to think about the nature of these. It's still, similar in the way it makes money. And I think the nature of these kind of businesses is that, what you can build is very sticky, right? Because especially if you have people that you've enticed into your funds, it's a long-term investment for them. If they're really going to stick to their plan, and then for a lot of those people, they will just stick with the fund. One bad year is not going to cause a problem. Now, of course, there are some managed fund investors who will get flighty after a bad quarter or whatever. But I think that the bigger issue, the reason that funds are always chasing that short-term performance is because, that's their marketing as well. So it's like getting new funds in. That's going to have a natural attrition that people want to withdraw their money from time to time for whatever reason. So you need to be able to replace that. If your performance hasn't been good, then that can be harder to replace the funds that go out just through the natural course of time. But ultimately, you do have a pretty sticky business with funds under management. And if you just and that's why you have this incentive, like people accumulate the funds, they hopefully they really want to get some good performance at the beginning so that they can boast good 3-5 year returns. At some point, they grow their funds as much as they can. And then the cynical fund manager, I'm not saying all fund managers do this, far from it, but the cynical approach would be if you do get lucky to get to that point, then you just index hug as much as you can. And you've got this swollen funds under management because you did well, maybe had a little bit of luck, did well in your first 3 years, and then you grow it as much as you can, probably to the capacity of your, the cynical approach that many people do. Is they'll then grow it to the absolute capacity or beyond the real capacity of whatever strategy they use to get the good performance. And then they'll sit there and harvest the money. Basically, that was probably the thing that Perpetual was positioned to do. However, you have a situation where I think it's been said in the newspaper quite a lot, the board collectively didn't own a lot of shares. You have this this no founder, no real owner management kind of business, which really is the kind of business that should have just sat there on its really good old brand and just milked it for as much as it was worth, right? But instead, what they of course go out and do is buy Pendle, like a similar business. Now, why would you do this? If you were the owner of Perpetual, which has this like really strong brand in this little niche and it has like a whole bunch of sticky FUM, you would probably just harvest it for as long as you can and be as small target as possible to make sure that you just the business lasts as long as possible, and never mind about growth so much. But if you're a professional manager trying to make a career or whatever, then, the temptation is to try and grow your empire. The temptation is to do something. Your incentives are to be the leader of an even bigger company. So that's what they did. They went and took on debt to make a bad acquisition. And then that's, of course, ruined the share price because it's destroyed value. And now, probably fearing again for their jobs in light of the ruined share price, the board and management team have been very keen to do something that like crystallizes some value for their shareholders so that they can, I guess, stay in their jobs, essentially. That involves actually selling that brand, which was built over a long time, and also probably selling the more attractive part of the business, which is like the sort of trustees section, which is not so much dependent on the performance of funds, blah, 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 and more like a platform that can scale well. So that's like the thing that buyers are probably more attractive in. And then you'd just be left with these, these funds that are potentially ex-growth and may not, be a growing business, but there's a world in which they could be harvested. But yeah, ultimately, it's just, you just never, in my opinion, like you just want to be owning funds managers that are growing, because once they stop growing, then the management, like very, very rarely, unless perhaps if they're very aligned, they very rarely are incentivized to do the right things, which is just to maximize what value they can and make the decline as slow as possible. They always kind of, the incentive is to do some crazy thing like a big acquisition or whatever. Yeah.
Can I just say one more thing on Perpetual? I just wanted to make the point that whenever you see the term strategic review, run. I'm getting to the point now where that was always a yellow flag, and now it's just like, it's almost an instant sell. If I see strategic review, it's just like even if you're successful on that, it's not going to be a near-term success. So it's just like, get the hell out of Dodge.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I wasn't always of that view, but I'm with you on that now.
Look, there are instances, there are exceptions that prove the rule, but
can't think of any.
Can't think of any. The other thing that I thought was worth noticing was that KKR, the barbarians at the gate, they're paying almost 14 times EBITDA for the wealth management and corporate trust business. Now, I'm sure on a pro rata basis, once they strip the guts out of that will be a much better multiple.
Yeah.
But we were just speaking about the McKinsey geniuses and whatnot. And, KKR is sort of in the same sort of orbit as that. What are they thinking? I mean, I would have thought that this is a buyer's market. Like, here is a company that's struggling. They're going through a strategic review. They've said that they want to spin this off, I would imagine they could go up here and say, we're giving you like $1. I don't know, something, certainly not 14 times EBITDA, right? Like, but again, I'm not KKR. There's very likely to be something I'm missing, but it strikes me as a very high multiple.
It does look like a lot, unless the EBITDA suppressed for some reason, or they have some other cost out plans or something, which they probably do. But
almost certainly they have that cost out. I mean, that's the playbook, right? Talk about financial engineering.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's jump to another piece of news that I think is interesting, which is PSC receiving a takeover. So PSC is an insurance broker. It's got a takeover. It had been what the kind of
just for anyone playing along at home. PSC's ticker is PSI.
Yes.
That's the stock we're talking about.
So it's an insurance broker. It had been, I guess, one of the smaller of the three remaining insurance brokers. It had recently bought one of the smallest ones, Insurance, and of the listed insurance brokers, I should say, Australian insurance brokers. It had been kind of trading on a lower multiple than the others. I think it probably, I think you could argue maybe the lower priced for partly for a reason that the other kind of AUB and Steadfast had some other reasons to like them with international expansion, blah, 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 different feathers in their cap. But PSC was kind of always more, it had, I guess, the founder ownership like some of the others. And the core thing though was that insurance broking, I think, is a very attractive business. We talked about this a little before in the pod, but it's quite an incredible business when you think about it. It's nothing like insurance. So you don't take any of the risk of the insurance, but you basically make a commission on the insurance sales. Primarily, these are to business. Sometimes they'll be insuring some personal stuff along with a small business owner, but primarily this is insurance for small business. So it's a necessary thing. You can't avoid having insurance, as we've seen some of us have experienced before. It's required. You don't have any choice about it. And once you've kind of selected your insurance broker, the next year the decision is almost automatic. Like, it'd be rare to swap insurance brokers because it can be a big headache if you do. And then you're paying the insurance broker.
Do not do that. Do that is my advice. Do not do that. Just once you've got it all in place, leave it. And
so they collect a commission of 20 to 30% of the insurance and never have any risk of the insurance. They're not like an insurance company. The insurance company, sells you the insurance, but then they have to take the risk of, your building burning down or whatever the insurance is for. They don't take the risk. They just take that commission. And there's this kind of natural growth of insurance over time as society gets more risky or more, complex, I should say. And that is this kind of beautiful capital light middleman who collect that and keep growing. There's times where insurance is harder to get, kind of attractive for them, but they just kind of ride this. They're not very cyclical, and they have, I think, a lot of attractiveness during an inflationary period as well, because they have a little bit of float. They get paid in advance, their commission sometimes, so they hold a bit there, but also their insurance, the premiums that they're clipping the ticket on rise faster in an inflationary environment because insurance is going up because the cost of repairing everything is going up, etc. So they're kind of geared to inflation without having cyclical risk. So I think a very strong, attractive business model.
Can I ask you a question? I mean, clearly it is, right? Clearly it is. But what's not obvious to me is what's the competitive advantage here? So there's two questions, right? So one is, that's all true, but it's kind of like, well, I'm going to do that as well. Yeah, me too. And you would imagine that there would be some competitive dynamic that would really drive that down to make it far less profitable than it is. But clearly that's not the case. So there's something there. I don't know what the answer is. Maybe you do. The second part of the question I have, and these aren't leading questions. I don't know the answer. I'm genuinely asking this, is why are the insurance companies doing it? Same with the banks. Why are the banks outsourcing all the mortgage broking for? Like, why all the mortgage origination for? Clearly they see it as advantageous as well. But to your point, Matt, if this is such a great part of the value supply chain, why are you outsourcing the good part and keeping the crappy part? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't know, Claude, if you want to jump in on the insurance brokers generally, but I guess it's just, I don't know. They own the personal relationship, so it just inherently is a good part. But I think that there's value in them kind of being across. Like, that's the idea of a mortgage broker. They kind of look across multiple different lenders. Same with an insurance broker, look at multiple different insurance. There is some scale. It's not a huge scale advantage, but you can kind of get better deals by being a large broking group that you can kind of work with the insurers, have more access to their systems, etc. But yeah, I think generally it's that idea of owning the client relationship. There's a lot of complexity to navigate. If a bank went out to do it, I guess there'd be the risk that they're always like finding little ways to charge you more, and the broker kind of is at least someone in your court. I don't know if do you have any other thoughts on that one, Claude?
Yeah, so like an insurance broker is essentially acts in a way as a buying agent. So I think if you look at PSC and the others, but they always tried to keep in mind that they're serving the client, the person buying the insurance. That means that they help the client understand what they need, how they should be, like how much should you go to insure your house. Well, how much should I insure my house to for like, what of all of the insurance companies are the best ones? I haven't heard of this particular insurance company. Is it definitely going to pay me? Like there's a lot of uncertainty and complexity. Matt said it, but I think that that's what makes it lend itself to having an intermediary there. In terms of like, why don't they do it, the insurance companies themselves? Like, well, they do. Like for travel insurance, for example, you generally just jump on the internet and buy your travel insurance probably direct from an insurer. And the same goes with your standard third party like car insurance stuff. Like there's a lot of insurance that isn't that complex, I guess, or that because is so common, the insurance company is able to like offer like fairly, compelling offerings just through its website. So I think that is a huge...
that complexity is a good point, Claude, because I think that's the difference. That was kind of one of my bear cases I had to work through with the insurance brokers is, will these be disintermediated by the insurers going direct, like you see in car? Like for car, you don't go to an insurance broker typically unless you're running a fleet, because it's very simple. But business risks aren't that simple. There's so many different levers that can be pulled throughout. So I think that complexity makes it more valuable to a client to have someone they can trust that is like feels like more in their interest, more like a relationship with a broker. And also means that from the insurance side, it's hard to offer just go to the website and tick these boxes product, because there's so much that goes into the assessment. For some of these professional indemnity insurance, for instance, the broker is collecting a lot of information that would be kind of cumbersome to run through multiple different things.
They're basically like governments. I actually strongly disagree with this model of running society, but with the professional indemnity stuff, like what has organically arisen from our common law system, right, is that, all these, the judges, the courts have started making, rules about people's liability when they hold themselves out as a lawyer or an advisor or a doctor or whatever it is. And then the courts have started finding certain situations where such and such a person has, breached their duties, et cetera, et cetera. And then legislation's kind of just come in, well, in order to try and minimize the disasters, not anyone can just hold themselves out to be a doctor. And any doctors does, and because things do go wrong, even for good doctors, any doctor that is practicing needs to have insurance. So it's like then outsources the final decision, or not the final decision, but partly outsources the decision about who can be a doctor or whatever to an insurance company. And hence why this is like, they're trying to actively manage their risks. Like they want to know where you've studied, that you've got all of, that you're a member of the relevant, I don't know actually the insurance situation for doctors, but I assume, you have to be a member of some professional body and blah, blah, blah. And this is sort of all of these different levels of, I guess, checking. And it's probably not the most efficient and clean and simple way to regulate, who can put themselves forth as a lawyer or whatever. But it is the way that has just organically grown up from a combination of our legal systems, which relies heavily on case law, and then basically the legislation co-ops in that case law by then like requiring insurance or whatever it is. So it's just, I think it's partly a quirk of the legal systems, and it's not a coincidence in my view that a lot of these companies have focused their efforts on Australia, UK, and the US, which I think have like, that sort of cookie cutter legal system that comes from the same source. And I suspect a close to cookie cutter insurance broken system that's like, grown up with that legal system. So that's why it makes sense. Look, I think it's obviously, so I own shares right now and have for quite some time on PSC Insurance. I'm not sure. It was a recommendation previously. It was a buy recommendation previously for a Rich Life. Now, obviously, just downgraded to hold. I think, whatever. It's a takeover situation now. That's sort of unfortunate in some ways because, I was hoping for like multi-year compounding. The reason I like the smaller one is because I see these insurance broking businesses as roll-up businesses. And as a general rule, I don't think roll-up businesses are that good. And because, they get, from time to time, they go on good runs, but it's very hard to find one that you would really, really want to own long term. And what you're really looking for in a roll-up I'm looking for in a roll-up business that I want to own for the long term rather than just for a little while, is I'm looking for like scalable and capital light kind of business. And that's the good thing about insurance broking, is it's capital light. Like you don't have to set up new centers to have, like childcare centers is like the opposite of it. They're like all of these rules around how many customers per employee you can have. And, you have to have all of these physical buildings and stuff to house everyone. And if you want to grow, you need more physical space. You don't need to get a bigger office just because you took on a new client as an insurance broker. Like it's absolutely day and night comparing insurance broker roll up to a childcare center roll up. And the economics of insurance brokers can just like keep improving, and until because of course then they get bigger and they can negotiate better deals and more attention from the insurance company themselves. If you're part of a broker network, like this is part of the ad, the advertisement to join like the Steadfast broker network, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, which is another one that I own shares in right now. And part of it is that if you're an insurance broker, you join their network, like you can get access to better workflow systems in order to be able to run your business better, to actually scale it up, to take on more clients without needing to buy a new employee. So that's one advantage of joining the roll-up. And then on top of that, you probably have some better pricing situations as well because they've negotiated as a group with the insurance company. But then most importantly, you get assistance as the insurance broker if your client does need to call upon that insurance. And if they do need help lobbying for their own interests against the insurance company who may be umming and ahhing about whether to pay, that's when it really makes a difference. Because as an insurer broker, like I'm sure that there are many of them that have a lot of pride in their work and that are good people. And for those people, when you can have to go out to bat for your client and try and make sure that they do get what's owed them under that insurance contract that you sold them, then being part of like a big network like that, they literally have a process where they can take advantage, like where Steadfast will help with that negotiation with the insurance companies themselves. So that means that you would probably have the pride that like you put your good best foot forward and help someone in your role as well. So I think there's a lot of reasons why you want to be part of a big team, and hence why I see this roll up continuing for quite some time and probably becoming the new norm. Like almost everyone will be, and there'll be eventually an oligopoly or something.
Yeah, that's cool. I think I get what you're saying. I think that the Steadfast kind of broker model is really interesting too, because you can join as part of the network without selling to them, and then they become the natural like acquirer. So it's like another thing that I think is quite interesting about Steadfast model.
Yeah, look, I've conflated the two of them, but I was more just talking about the industry and why I find it attractive.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. No, it's very attractive, and one I hadn't appreciated for a long time, but definitely do now. All right, do we have time for any other companies for about?
Yeah, we're chucking a baby because those ones are pretty big, right? So if you have any like tiny companies you want to talk about, float out there. I thought I would mention Beamtree, I guess, because that's one I bought shares in a little while ago. Like not an official recommendation, more just for me it's just a speculation. But the reason is because it basically got so cheap, and there's a couple of these ones now, these smaller caps that maybe aren't not profitable, but like do have some cash still, that have, the expectations have come right out of them. And Beamtree is essentially kind of right up my alley because it is a software company. So, in theory, it could scale well into profitability. Unfortunately, the reason that I just consider it as a mere speculation is that it's, still loss making. And also it's a weird amalgamation of like basically 4 different businesses, and I'm not sure if there's like any real synergies there. So overall pretty weird little business. But some of these get super low multiples of revenue. So like it's bumping along around 2 times ARR. And now if you just remember, like a few years ago, we were habitually looking at companies that were on 5, 10, 20 times ARR. And they are saying that they're going to grow it organically, by the way. And they have been getting a bit of organic growth, which is obviously important. Like, why would it get more than 2 times ARR? Well, that would just be growth. But either way, look, it's a cheap speculation on that regard. And then I got super lucky because one of the directors, the chairwoman, I guess, started like adding shares, buying shares on market. So that's a positive heuristic. I don't really know if it means anything. Who knows what's actually going to happen? But seeing a few of these cracked out, like, small caps that have just been like absolutely fallen a long way. I've got more coming in the pipeline, and they're terrible. Like some of them, like, they're terrible companies. I wouldn't want to like, definitely this is high risk stuff. Like this is not, the kind of long-term necessarily compounding kind of things that I look at. And more just a frivolous idea. But nonetheless, I'm kind of interested. I think I've talked about it ages ago on the podcast as well. Like, I'd be kind of interested in having a smattering of like small, decent little like companies that have revenue and customers and maybe they can make it to break even kind of thing. These smaller companies that are like trading at real lows still, like, because even though we've had a bullish market and a strong market at the higher end of the growth spectrum, we've seen the really like the ASX 200 kind of stocks come right back up. That hasn't really flowed down to the small end of the market, and there's no guarantee it will. But, you know, generally speaking, a necessary precursor for the smaller stocks having a bit of a bull market is the bigger stocks having one first, and I think we've got that. So that makes me more optimistic and more inclined to, you know, buy shares in like what I basically see as like maybe a takeover target, something like BMT, because it's just so cheap. Like surely someone else could come in and be like 2 times ARR, I can like rip out a whole bunch of costs, make this thing look a little bit better, and then like sell it for 5 times ARR in a few years.
Need to get the McKinsey guys in.
Yeah. Well, no.
Yeah, really large insider buying. So yeah, I can see that's definitely, I can see why that's inflected the stock pretty well, the share price at least. Cool. Did you have any other thoughts on Beamtree, Andrew?
I'm actually trying to rack my memory. We spoke with Tim Kelsey, the CEO, August last year. But geez, I mean, I'm a goldfish, man. I have difficulty remembering what I had for breakfast. Yeah, I never added it to the scorecard, so I guess there's that.
Yeah, I think it was looking pretty ugly a year ago, mate. I think that you probably made the right decision because it was like at a higher share price than it is currently, and with like worse actual numbers. Like they are, even though I still do say, you know, that they're basically, I wouldn't want to put too much money into like these kind of companies just because it's just it's the same old sad old story. You know, they're like telling you that they made an operating profit of $100,000, but like if you actually you're gonna bet for sure that like the statutory loss is still there, is basically my point of view. And it's like, oh man, these companies like just with their like classic Charlie Munger's bullshit profit, like just give us a statutory profit and you'll just see how much people like, it just proves your business is like viable, you know. So it's still well short of that, but you know, some of these things do make it. Like look at the fun we've had, you know, on the podcast. When we first talked about RPM Global, I'm pretty sure that was like still making a loss. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but like it's in the last couple of years, we've finally seen it cross over into profitability, and it's like been a good ride essentially. So, which I own shares in that one as well. So like, that's why I would be interested in some little sub-quality, sub-scale software stock. Like there could be like a decent run if it does blah, blah, blah. But there's also no guarantee that this thing gets to profitability without needing to raise capital. You never know what's going to happen next.
The follow-up question I guess I have there is, if that's the thesis and it's not the bottom drawer multi-year compounder, what price do you sell out at? Like 20%, 30%? Like when do you pull the trigger?
So I think I was late to this, right? Because I was, you know, focusing on, which I don't regret, but at the same time, I should just do more things. But like I was focusing on building some of like the more positions like PSI, right? Which PSC Insurance, which is, I think that's good. It's more valuable if you can find a buy and hold forever kind of company, right? So focusing on that. But what we did see quite a bit in the last year, which I didn't really capitalize on, is a lot of takeovers of cracked out small caps. Like so many came to mind. The only one that I actually got on board with was Cirrus Networks, if you remember that little IT company. But there's been heaps. Quantum IP, that's one that I looked at so many times because it looked so cheap on the numbers. Like that was actually cheap on profit. But then it was sort of going nowhere and nothing. But like the thesis would be someone else could come in, right? And then take it over. So that's that. There's Whisper, right? Similar story. Like I'm not saying, by the way, Beamtree's as good a candidate as these other ones I'm naming by virtue of the fact that the other ones have been taken over. They are, or they've got an offer. They are better candidates. We saw even Altium get taken over at top dollar. Obviously, that was a buy and hold forever style stock that I was going for there. Well, actually, it's not even been taken over yet, but I sold out. But there's still been like heaps I missed out on. For example, Damster, I'm pretty sure got one, although I think that's still listed, but it did get an uplift there. No, Damster's gone actually, and that must have gone through. So Whisper happened. Volpara was really the one that inspired me to think of Beamtree, because like, man, Volpara hurts because I followed that for so many years. I did own it. Like I was even thinking, 50 cents, blah, blah, blah. It looks interesting. That was when there was CEO buying, if you recall. Also, you know, she went on Strawman and basically, you know, they were doing a cost cutting thing. They were turning themselves into a profitable business. Like they decided to get the message and they were doing that. They let a bunch of people grow. Their cash flow improved, like everything was showing that they were on track. And then as soon as they kind of got to this critical point where they basically proved that they were now a sustainable business, a takeover offer comes in. So I say, what are the other little companies that got caught out? They were they had a plan. It was a viable plan to lose money and become profitable later. But then they got caught out because they thought that they were always going to be able to keep on like raising capital really easily. And then, 2023, 2022, the funding for these the easy funding for these loss-making small caps just dried up, and so much stuff has had its share price smashed since then. What's the stuff that I'm looking for is the stuff that got caught out there, like their share prices come down like 75% or whatever it is, or 50% or 60% or more, and they're going to make it though. But they have got the cash, they have got growth, they can actually cross over this line, even though now people are in doubt about it. They're the kind of things that I would think of as an interesting speculation if I bought a whole basket of them, which is now my current side project, is to find a basket of stuff like that.
You didn't really answer my question, sir.
What was the question?
The question was, I get the approach.
When it gets its takeover offer.
Okay, when it gets its takeover offer. Okay.
That's my thesis is
okay.
That I hope but some of them won't. And so the question is, I guess, is when do you give up, right? And I guess that just has to be if you get, this is why I'm saying I just bought a really small holding, and then I'm going to I haven't thought of giving up too much. I might just get wrecked on it, to be honest. Because I'm sure if I give up, it'll just be because things have gone so badly and it's not going to get a takeover offer, or at least I don't think it will. And then I'm sure if I do give up and sell, then they'll get a takeover offer the next day.
Guaranteed.
All right. Should we wrap it there, gents?
Yep.
All right. Till next time, thanks very much for listening. Hit us up on Twitter @BabyGiantsPod. And we'll see you next week.
See ya.